Good evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is Courtney Chandler. I'm the Senior Assistant Dean and Chief Strategy and Operating Officer here at the Haas School of Business. On behalf of Interim Dean Laura Tyson, who couldn't be here tonight due to a prior commitment, it is great pleasure to welcome you to tonight's Dean Speaker Series featuring a conversation between Eddie Hartwig of the U.S. Digital Service and our own Maura O'Neill. The U.S. Digital Service was commissioned by President Obama in August 2014 after the disappointing rollout of the website healthcare.gov in October 2013. Many of you in this room likely remember reading the dismal reports. The day it went live, a total of 6 people were able to sign up for health insurance. I imagine that wasn't the target number they were shooting for. And it was not until a surge of volunteer tech talent convened in Silicon Valley and arrived in Washington, D.C. that we got a fix for healthcare.gov. The lessons learned from the early failure and eventual success of healthcare.gov impressed upon President Obama the importance of creating efficient, effective, and easy-to-use online interfaces, allowing U.S. citizens to more effectively engage with the federal government. The ongoing goal of the U.S. Digital Service today is to make interacting with the federal government services online as easy as ordering a book over the internet. Tonight, we are thrilled to have the Deputy Administrator of the U.S. Digital Service, Eddie Hartwig, join us in conversation with Maura O'Neill. So before I turn it over to them, let me just say a few words about both of their backgrounds. Eddie Hartwig's career represents a microcosm of the talents and skills that the U.S. Service needs to succeed in its mission. Starting as a public defender in Boston, Eddie has a long record of public service. He served the nation as a diplomat in Austria, the Dominican Republic, and Ethiopia. He's been a social impact startup co-founder, creating Elevate Entrepreneurship, a grassroots community of Central and Eastern European entrepreneurs, investors, policymakers, and politicians. In September 2016, he joined the U.S. Digital Service as a strategy and operations expert and became the Deputy Administrator in June 2017. In conversation with Eddie, I'm pleased to welcome Haas Distinguished Teaching Fellow, Maura O'Neill. In many ways, Maura's career mirrors Eddie's in his diversity and commitment to public service. She is a 3-time startup co-founder. She served as Chief of Staff to Maria Cantwell, Senator from the state of Washington. And during the Obama administration, Maura served as a technology and innovation leader, including a tour as the Chief Innovation Officer for the U.S. Agency for International Development. She is also a proud alumna of the Berkeley Columbia Executive MBA program and a Chait Award-winning instructor in our Berkeley MBA for Executives program. We are so fortunate to have both Eddie and Maura here for tonight's Dean Speaker Series, and please join me in a warm welcome.
So thanks so much, Eddie. I was so excited to meet you at the White House last year and just so struck by your smarts and passion and commitment. It just is so fabulous to have you at Berkeley. So I just say thank you so much for being here tonight.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words.
So Courtney talked about, so I want to talk about your journey a little bit, and then we'll go on to USDS. And because I think that if there's anything that is going to characterize our careers, is that we're going to have lots of chapters. And you have lots of chapters. In fact, you let me know that you actually started out not as a public defender, but as a plumber. So tell us how that happened and how you made the leap from plumber to public defender. Because I think that there's probably a bunch of people sitting here saying, oh, that federal government's a long ways away. I don't know how I do that. So if you can make the leap from plumber to public defender, I'm sure that some of the smartest people in the world that are sitting in this room tonight can possibly think about this amazing chapter they might have in Washington, D.C. So tell me about plumbing.
All right. It's funny. So it's true. I've had a lot of chapters. It is true that I have been a plumber. It is, or a plumber trainee.
Yeah.
I have built houses and done a bunch of stuff. It actually started in college for me. I had jobs before that. Actually, my first job was manually entering data into my leading edge computer on behalf of my local store that wanted to record all of their receipts. It was a terrible,
And the
terrible
computer
job.
was called Leading Edge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it was actually, it was, the
There
screen
may not
was
be
green.
a lot of people in this room that
That's a
knew
good
that
point.
that's actually what the computer was called.
Yeah, they really, like later on, you got graphics by putting like ones and zeros to make a sort of like weird Jeopardy box so that you could play video games. It was a long time ago. But you know, in college, you know, it's academics, and I've never been really good at sitting still. I value education, I valued college, but when it came to the summers and everybody else was doing academic fellowships, I actually wanted to go do something with my hands. And so I got into plumbing as a way of like sort of doing something constructive. You know, plumbing is an interesting job. Like you connect with people, you learn a lot of different skills. There's actually quite a bit of mathematics and physics that go into it. Lots of funny sayings, really interesting people, none of which I can probably say here on the stage. But I think I just got into construction work over time because it gave me an outlet for hands-on work
Yeah.
that I wasn't getting when I was doing purely academic things.
All that cerebral work, right?
But I think that carries forward to the rest of my career. Like, I went to law school. I mean, I hustled around for a little bit and, before that, and I went to law school. But when I graduated from law school, I didn't want to go work for a law firm. Like, I wanted to be in court. I wanted to go to trial. I wanted to do something. I wanted to do the active bit of the law, not just the theoretical bit.
Right.
And so I've always kind of,
And
I
you
think,
didn't
saw
learn that in
balance.
law school. Right, the active part. I mean, meaning
You can,
it's,
yeah.
but I mean, there's nothing that substitutes for being on the ground, actually in the courtroom, either as a prosecutor or a public defender, right?
Yep, that's right. And actually, I was lucky to go to a great law school, Tulane, where I had a mentor who was just a fantastic person, and she ran the criminal law clinic. And so I actually spent my my third year of law school, essentially in court. So I got myself a temporary license to the Orleans Parish, to the Louisiana bar, and I went down to Orleans Parish Court, and I tried all manner of cases all day long. And
Oh,
got
so
credit
this
for
was
it.
actually when you were in law school.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's more common now, but those practical clinics were a huge part of keeping me focused on what I was doing.
So let's leap forward many chapters
Sure.
and tell this audience, and we'll get into a little bit more to what is U.S. Digital Service. Courtney sort of did a great introduction, but tell us, how did you stumble upon the U.S. Digital Service, and why did you make this leap? Because you had some way cool jobs. I mean, working in Europe and Austria and doing entrepreneurship in Europe. I mean, that is way cool. So why take this leap back to this big behemoth called the federal government, in particular U.S. Digital Service?
I think I'm prone to the long answer, so I'll just say the short answer is that it works. It's a way to get things done effectively and efficiently, and having spent 10 years in the government, sort of struggling from the grassroots up and being that guy that spent 6 years trying to solve one small problem, I was attracted to the idea that you could actually get things done by this unique formula. And people will ask me, you know, what's the greatest technology that USDS has ever come up with? And I'll tell you, it's USDS itself, which is to say that you get support from the highest level of government.
Because you're in the White House, right?
Yep, absolutely. And you get that permission, but you don't use that permission to lord it over people. You use that permission to get access. And then you go and you find the people who are in need of a service, and you find the people that are administering that service, so the public servant in the government, and you find out, you talk to them about what the friction is, because those are the people that know, right? The nurse at the VA who's administering medicine, that nurse and that patient have a relationship, and they know whether that medicine is working or it's not working.
Right.
But there are 17 layers of management between that nurse and the secretary of the VA.
Wow, 17 layers.
Right? So it's a game of telephone. Everybody is there because they want to do right, but only
But it's a
the nurse
system
and the
that doesn't
patient
work,
see the
right?
outcome, right?
Yeah.
And so this allows us to get the permission from up high. USDS allows us to, work with the secretary of the VA, go talk to the nurse, find out what the problem is, go talk to the patient, find out what their experience is, not only in did it work, but also how much work did it take to get the medicine in the first place, and then deliver that story back up to the top, where we can get buy-in, where we can get enough support to move that huge beast, which is the largest civilian federal agency and the largest healthcare administrator in the United States, to actually move and shift and start changing things for
So
the
if you
better.
can fix those problems, not just signing up for the Affordable Care Act or what was in the vernacular known as Obamacare, what I hear you saying is that you can be really involved in helping people live a healthier life. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal. I mean, technology is the tool that we use, right? And then the fine people in the front row here are either from my team or alumni from my team. Please talk to them if you're interested. But we all know, being technologists, that technology is how we ourselves are going to get there. But the end result that we are seeking is not technology. The end result we are seeking are, veterans that feel respected by the service. They are, doctors that spend more time looking their patient in the eye than doing paperwork on a computer, right? These are the people, like immigrants that have spent 5 years being an LPR, doing the right thing.
What's LPR?
A legal permanent resident, a green card holder. You spend
Yeah.
5 years, minimum 3 years if you're married. You go through this process, and the promise is that if you do it right at the end, if you want to be an American citizen, you can naturalize and become an American citizen. But if you do 5 or plus years worth of work and you get to the end of the process and it feels like a roadblock, it feels like the government is putting things in front of you to make it harder to do the thing that you feel like you've already earned, that in fact you have already earned,
Yeah.
right? That is not how I want my country to be minting new citizens. I
Right.
want that to be a joyous experience. I want that to be a seamless experience. I want that to be an experience that is indicative of the ability and the capability and the generosity of this country. And quite frankly, when it's 22 pages of paper with 18 pages of instructions, right? And
Don't feel that way.
It gets processed over a significant period of time. It doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, it didn't feel that way, and now it does, because
That's
100% of all all of naturalization paperwork is now processed online, thanks to a combination of great public servants at USCIS, the Citizenship and Immigration Service, and good support from their leadership there, and a great team of people at USDS that are
How long
making it
did that
happen.
take USDS in conjunction with immigration to do?
That is actually a really great question, and you're going to catch me, because we actually launched a solution about a year in advance, and the infrastructure wasn't in place to support that, and so we had to actually take it down, and we relaunched it again last year.
Yeah.
So how long does it take to do it? Half of the equation is how long does it take to solve the technical problem is very, very different than how long does it take to overcome the policy burdens and the hoops that we need to jump through.
Yeah.
So 6 months for the technology and sometimes a year and a half for the policy.
Yeah. How many people worked on it?
That's a good question. The team, I think, at USCIS, someone in the front row might know better than I have, was always about, I think around, we have multiple projects, but working on immigration, I would say between 5 and 10 at any given time. But because of the way that USDS works, we have a model where people can join USDS for a short period of time, contribute, and then move on. And so that baton has been passed several times.
Yeah. But how cool is that to be one of 5 or 10 people that, particularly if you were a green card holder at some point in your life as well, or you had a family member or something, how incredible to say, I'm one of 5 or 10 people that really provide a leadership role in fixing this. That's the stuff that on my deathbed I would be sort of most proud of. I mean, I say that in all seriousness.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I agree. I have no idea what I'm going to do with my life after this, because I feel like this is where this is where I belong in this moment, and I know that because of the way we work,
The scale is amazing in terms of impact.
I got to pass the baton to somebody else, and I'll be happy to do it, but I'll also miss the opportunity to do so much for so many.
Yeah, it's a very important piece to say. You know, I spent 5 years in Washington, D.C., a year in the Senate, and in President Obama's administration. And people told me, and so I would pass this on to all of you, people told me whether people just did a unpaid internship on the Hill or someplace else when they were 20, or whether they were secretary in a cabinet or anything in between, that they always cited it as the most impactful, most incredible part of their life. And I think that they told me that before I went, and they were absolutely right. You know, that whether anybody knows your name when you walk out that door, it doesn't really matter. It's the caliber and the importance of the projects that you get to work on that just is awe-inspiring.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So let's step back and fill in the blanks a little bit.
Sure.
So Courtney said that USDS started because of a colossal and very public technical failure. You know, they think there was the hope that 7 million people would sign up for the Affordable Care Act. So 6 in one day is not exactly a great track record. Okay. So, and President Obama sort of recognized this problem was bigger than just healthcare.gov. So tell us what actually U.S. Digital Service does and sort of what its remit is.
Sure. I mean, I think I wasn't in USDS at the time of healthcare.gov, at least the initial work on healthcare.gov. I think at the time the president was just focused on getting the website back up.
Right.
I think that, but there were
First things first.
That's right, and that's oftentimes the problem. Like, number one thing is making sure that like the thing that's broken is less broken. And so, you know, we do a lot of work that is just trying to make sure that those critical public-facing services continue to flow. So that doesn't always lead to great technology. Sometimes that just leads to like a lot of duct tape, right? Like digital duct tape, trying to keep the thing running.
Because we talked about it. You can't sort of take down systems.
No,
you
that's
can't
right.
take down the Social Security system at the same time you're improving it. You just don't have that luxury. I mean, I occasionally go on my systems and they'll say, oh, well, we just want to tell you that we're going to have a scheduled outage for X amount of time. Well, if you're dealing with the immigration system, if you're dealing with a whole slew of things, that's, I think, what's interesting is the technical challenges are enormous because of that.
Yeah, it's true, although they do take down government websites for scheduled time also, which is maddening. But also inopportune times. But yeah, so the first problem is oftentimes that. We have seen systems for the technical in the room that we go to, and they're measured in uptime, not downtime. Right? So the industry standard for this area of the world is like 5 nines, right? You want your website running like 99.999% of the time. The 5 nines of government is like, on a good day, 98%. And on a bad day, it's a system like one we came across that was up 16% of the time. So they were measuring it in...
So 84% of the time it's down.
Yeah. And we're talking about critical services. We're talking about like how our government functions. We're talking about the basis of society. And so that's just not okay. So like, number one, we solve that problem. Number one, it doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to work. Number two, if we have the luxury of building some relationships and you know, like an emergency is a great place to enter because people will ask for help. Once we've proven that we can bring that value, we can build a stronger relationship that lets us do what we really want to do, which is prevent those things from happening in the first place. And so things like healthcare.gov were the former, but led to things like the Quality Payments Program, which was part of the 2015 MACRA Act that said that we had this best described for people that don't know it as taxes for doctors. It's a really onerous task that doctors have to do every year with a really sort of well-intentioned goal of providing better quality services. But it had a lot of the same features. It had a hard deadline, it had a launch date, it had an open season, and it was 2,100 pages of law, right? And so
2,100 pages.
I know, right? And so what we did is having learned from healthcare.gov and having had the support of CMS in that instance, we were able to actually approach the problem ahead of time, which is to say we were able to break it down and try, and forgive me for this, but try to translate that legislative language into logic that could actually be acted upon. But we were able to do that. And the Quality Payments Program, which could have been a disaster, actually launched on time. The open season went flawlessly, and doctors love it.
Wow, that's great. So tell us about one of your favorite projects.
So I have 2 children, and this is very similar to asking me which of my children I like better. I'm gonna.
So it has to be a secret just between us, even though this is videotape is going to be.
The
put on the
videotape's
web.
making me nervous. I think.
So just randomly pick one.
I think I had anticipated this, and so I brought a bit of a prop to show, because I think I have a project that really explains a lot. It explains a lot about what we do and how we do it and why it's important.
Okay, great.
We at USCS, we pick projects based. There's more work than we could ever do. So we have to sort of triage. And so we pick projects based on impact, which sometimes means like big numbers, right? 24 million people getting healthcare is a big deal.
Yeah.
400,000 veterans being able to sign up for healthcare online in 10 minutes rather than waiting 137 days for a letter to come in the mail is a big deal. But sometimes the impact is, and for me, the projects that I hold most dear are the ones where the impact is about making good on a broken promise. And so I have this project, and I'm just going to tell you about it a little bit, and I'm going to show you some slides, and then I'm going to turn the slides off so that I won't distract you. So there's a group of people that have served their country in the military, and for a number of reasons have been less than honorably discharged from the military. And in some of those cases, it is because of their sexual orientation. Before 1992, before Don't Ask, Don't Tell, there were a number of people that were removed from the military with less than an honorable discharge because of their sexual orientation, their preference. There have been people since then that have served their country in combat zones, and they have suffered post-traumatic stress disorder or a traumatic brain injury that has led to behavior that has gotten them thrown out of the military. And that's not right. And the good side of the story is that the DoD, the Department of Defense, and the Department of Veterans Affairs have agreed that they need to correct this problem. And so they have created a massive framework to try and find these people and make them whole again. The problem is, it, much like MACRA, is an onerous process. It involves, I think, 6 separate boards that are different for the branches, that are different for what kind of discharge you've had.
So somebody has to navigate one of those 6 boards in order to get this reversed, right?
Yeah, and so I have this slide for you, which kind of shows you what you have to do or understand in order to even submit
Start this process?
a request. Yeah, it just keeps going. And so I'm going to go back a second and talk about like why this is a bigger problem than it appears to be, which is the other part of it, which is really interesting from our perspective, is that it's an incredible design challenge. So if you were a member of the military and you'd left the military, the way that the government would normally communicate with you would be through the VA. But this is a group of people who served their country, were removed from the military, and were told they are specifically not veterans. And therefore, they don't look to the VA for information. So, one, how do you find these people? Like, how do you find them and talk to them? Like, they rightfully believe that they were removed incorrectly and that they have been punished for serving their country.
The rest of their life so far.
Yeah, like literally.
Because that follows them.
They feel that they have to choose between who they are as an individual and what they believe they are, which is a veteran, and their personality, they've been split. And it's really uncomfortable, and it's really unnatural, and it's really, quite frankly, unfair. The problem is, how do you find these people? And the bigger problem, which I think some of you are probably thinking, is if you find, it's an application process. So if you find them, and if you ask them to apply, what happens if you deny them? Right? What could be more insulting than to go through that process again and be humiliated again? And so the problem is, a lot of people, that was happening because they were trying to file this paperwork. And this paperwork is ridiculous. This is only like the first couple of pages, right? And so our team set about to try and solve this problem with this amazing technology called a questionnaire. Right? But look, it's a human questionnaire, right? And what it does belies actually its complexity, which is it asks 11 questions. 11 simple questions, or so it seems. But underneath these 11 questions, which are responsive as you go, lie more than 10,000 permutations, like 10,000 possible outcomes or possible differences that are lying behind these 11 questions. So we take that huge, like onerous paperwork, decision-making process, and we make it, quite frankly, simpler to understand. But more than that, the language, you can't really read it because it's a terrible slide, because we're going so fast. But the language is human language. It talks to you as if you're a human being. And it's because we actually went...
Like you and I would talk.
Yeah, and it's because we went and talked to human beings. We went and talked to these people, and we said, like, do you understand this paperwork? And they said, God, no. And we said, would you go through this process? And they said, I would be afraid to go through this process. And we said,
I wouldn't even start, right?
What if it was this? Right? What don't you understand about this? And they would tell us, and we would listen. And then we would go and we would fight with lawyers about what the language meant, right? Because the lawyers want the legal language, and human beings want human being language. And this is one of those cases where we were able to win and get human language and put it up on a website, and not only get them to answer the questions, but the sort of like nefarious part of this process was that there was this like little tiny like line at the bottom of the paperwork that said, like, if you have additional information, attach it. But what we learned by interviewing the people that do the processing of this is that, like, if you don't attach additional information, and lots of it, then you're just going to get rejected. Wow. So we were able to say, like, hey, instead of having this one line that just says, like, maybe you want to staple some stuff onto your application, we were like, we should give you an explainer of what kind of information you should
Would be
get.
helpful,
and that
right?
maybe you should put a lot of it there. And we have, and it works, and it went live, and it affects, in this case, only, quote unquote, 75,000 people, but it is 75,000
individuals.
Broken promises.
Yeah.
Right? And if you see, yeah. And so there are some cards, this is a bit cheeky, but there are some cards on your seats that some of them I think are about immigration and some of them are about this project. So if you don't have this project, you can kind of look at your neighbor. It'll tell you that we have reached an incredible number of these people. We've not just built the tool, we've not just done the work, we've not just fought the lawyers, but we've done the work to find people and get them to apply. And if I remember correctly, somebody who actually has the card on their desk or on their hand can tell me, I think it's like 33% of people have actually filed a discharge upgrade and been successful.
Wow.
That's something in that range. And it goes up every day. Which leads me to the next piece, which is how do you get more people to see this stuff? There's the human piece, there's the hard work, but there's also the next big thing for USDS, which is that we have worked with the VA. We've built tools like this, and we put it on a site called vets.gov to tell them, like, hey, this is how technology should work. And quite frankly, it should be about people, right? Because if you go to the VA today, it's about the VA. It's a digital org chart. You have to know the difference between the Veterans Health Administration and the Veterans Benefits Administration to know which one to click on
So
to
we
get
need
the
a
benefit.
PhD in that before we even.
Not anymore, because on Veterans Day this year,
Vets.gov, right?
on Veterans Day this year, there will be no more vets.gov. On Veterans Day this year, the VA.gov will be about veterans.
Wow.
1.8 million people go to vets.gov every month, and there's 5 times that traffic on VA.gov. So when vets.gov goes away and when VA.gov becomes about vets, there will be 9 or 10 million people a month that are looking at a website that doesn't say, this is who the secretary is, and this is what,
Assistant
veteran
secretary and
it says,
is it-
do you need health care? Do
Wow.
you need to locate a veteran center?
And it's because of the effort.
Do you
that
want to
guys did.
understand your GI?
So how do people in this room and their friends join you? What kinds of skill sets are you looking for? What's the mechanics of it?
It's really simple, actually. So we are looking for...
And we'll talk about some of the requirements, the other things we talked about before later. But right
Yeah.
now, just give us
Yeah.
sort of the skill sets.
we're looking for engineers of all stripes. We're looking for product managers, technical product managers. We're looking for designers, everybody, UX designers, researchers, IA people. We're taking your skills and we're basically just opening a door for you. We're saying, here's a really hard problem and here's permission to solve it. And we're going to do everything that we can to support you. But it's really like our work is dependent on getting people like that into the room and getting them to solve the problem. And if you meet that definition, we are looking for people that are mid-career or later. We're looking for people that have worked on difficult projects before. We're looking for people that have tried things and failed and then tried again and succeeded. We are looking for, if you're that kind of person, then you just go to usds.gov. There's a join button on there. It is not USA Jobs. You can fill out the application in 5 minutes. We don't even need a resume. You just give us your name and your phone number, we'll call you.
That's great. And how long is the sort of tour of duty? And
Yeah.
and how long does the process take from the time I push that join button to the time I know whether this is going to work for you and for me?
Oh, that's a really good question. The tours of duty are from 3 months to 2 years, and then you can actually renew. So you can do a really short tour. I recommend 6 months because it takes a little while to get up to speed in government. But don't worry, if you're afraid to commit to 6 months, just do 3 and we'll convince you to stay for 24.
Is it paid or not paid?
It is paid. Yep, absolutely. We pay as much as we can possibly pay. We'll pay you as much as the government allows us to pay you, which is actually not a bad salary. I think that we're too hard on it. One of the things I love about USDS is that we do everything in our power to pay everybody the same. So no matter where you're coming from, no matter whether you're a product manager or an engineer, whether you are a man or a woman, whether you are, a first-generation immigrant, first-generation American, or whether you are a Mayflower kid, everybody at USDS falls into the same. You're all experts, you're all hired into the same thing, and you're all treated with equal respect and dignity. We expect people to sort of self-assemble on teams to solve problems, to ask for help when they need it, and to just basically put their head down and do the best and do the right thing for the people that they
It's
serve.
amazing work you do. Just amazing work. I just feel like so lucky as an American that U.S. Digital Service exists and that you're solving these kinds of problems. I mean, that is just, wow. So there are a couple glitches or a couple things that are requirements, like you have to be a U.S.
that's
citizen, right?
You do have to be a U.S. citizen, yes.
So can you have a green card or you have to actually have gone through citizenship?
You have to have actually gone through citizenship. In fact, we actually have a member of USDS right now who naturalized and immediately applied. So she became a U.S. citizen, she registered to vote, she applied for her passport, and she applied online.
So you could be a U.S. citizen for a nanosecond before you join.
It's just a requirement because of the work that we do. You have to pass a process which includes a background check, and it requires American citizenship, which also requires you to be able to pass a drug test and not have done drugs for the last year, which is a significant number of people don't make it because of that.
Right.
We also ask that you...
So let's just stop
Yeah.
on that for a sec, because
Sure.
cannabis is legal in the state
Yeah.
of California.
Yeah,
And
lucky you.
despite the fact that it's legal in the state of California, you have to have abstained or either never used or abstained for 12 months. So if you want to go into USDS and this is something that you enjoy every evening, you could just take a break for a year and join.
It's a tall order, but I promise it's worth it.
Yeah.
And we also ask that people move to DC because that's where the work is. We are working at the highest levels of government, and we need to be there to engage with those people. And so there's not a lot of hierarchy at USDS. Everybody, I'm the deputy administrator, but my job is just another job. Like, I'm no more or less important than every engineer that we have, or every product manager that we have, or every designer, or the talent team that does all the work of bringing people in. You know, everybody has a role to play, and that's kind of how the game is operated. So you need to come there because it's not me that's going to go meet with the deputy secretary of some agency. It's oftentimes going to be you, and sometimes it's your first week. Like our administrator, Matt Cutts, all of us like none of us became just joined to be the administrator. Like I didn't join to be the deputy administrator. I just sort of fell into this. Matt joined and he went to our team at the Department of Defense, and they were working on a project to try and improve the way that NATO shared information. And so his first week, he actually was supposed to join a week later, and his boss called him and was like, hey, if you come a week early, you should come because I'll take you to Afghanistan.
Wow.
And so in Matt's first week, he was actually in a helicopter over Afghanistan doing user research in the field because that's where the users were.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. I remember Senator McCain and Senator Graham were talking, and or Senator Lieberman and Senator McCain, and they said, you know, neither of them became president or vice president or whatever, but they said, how many people get to do the kind of work we did?
Yeah.
And they specifically said, how many people get to go to Afghanistan and Iraq and really try to thoughtfully address what are very, very difficult problems on the ground. So that's amazing. So I'm going to grab everybody in here for questions. I know some of you in the evening weekend program are on your dinner break and so have to go. So we are thrilled you are here, and but we know that you may just have to sneak out. But we have microphones on each side, so if you can line up or come up and introduce yourself and say what, if any, connection you have to Hawes. You just happen to wander in here, and ask any question. Eddie is honest as the day is long, so you can ask any question about this, but please do. But while they're thinking about that, let me just ask you one thing. You had said that one of tell us about the community and the culture of working there, because like a lot of people, you know, we are bombarded every day with whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, how toxic the environment is in Washington, D.C. So, you know, it doesn't really always come to the top of somebody's list, oh, I got to go to D.C. That's just where I got to be. So tell us a little bit, I mean, completely awesome, the projects you're working on, but tell us about the community you have at U.S. Digital Service.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's a community of people that have come because they want to serve. It's a nonpartisan group, so we do our best to be as representative of the country as we can. We take that really seriously, and so what we do is these are technologists. Technologists are everywhere in this country. They are certainly concentrated in certain spots, but we need to make sure that we get people from everywhere. So we look for geographic diversity, we look for gender diversity, we look for racial diversity, religious diversity, sexual preference. We are trying to create a team that's representative of the country. And when you pull together a team that truly is that, and that come with a mission, and that mission is to help people, what you get, especially at this level, is one of the most incredible groups of people it is the most incredible group of people I've ever worked with. I've had a lot of careers, I've been a lot of places, but there's no better, more welcoming, more resilient, funnier, you know, group of people, because that's what it takes to do this job. Like you said about McCain and Lieberman, like it is an incredibly difficult job.
Yeah. And
so we make sure that the people that come to USDS are there for not only the mission, but for each other. Yeah. Because it shows, right? It shows that we have alumni here, we have colleagues from the Obama White House here, we have current staff members who are on the West Coast for the time being, and we're always sort of self-assembling. There are alumni groups out there already. So it it is not what people come for, but it is probably one of the better parts of being there, is that you...
Is this amazing set of both friendships and professional relationships that provide people incredible new networks, incredible new insights into what all their friends are now doing around the country, around the world.
Yeah, I can't think of a place that has pulled together this many people from every major tech company, every successful startup founders, the exceptional people from within government. It's just this perfect, I hate to say it, but it's like this perfect melting pot of amazing people doing amazing things with an amazing mission.
Who love to go to work every day.
Yeah.
At least most days.
There are days. I mean, it's
for all
hard.
of us, yeah.
But again, we do fun things too. Right? We know that people are displacing themselves across the country many times. So there are all the regular team building things.
Yeah.
People have a great sense of humor. You need it.
You
need to bring it with you. Make sure you pack it.
you look at that, the thing that you said, to get to that, there are days you need a sense of humor.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But we, to this day, I fall back on our alumni and people to do just about everything. We have alumni that come to events, they do presentations, everybody's still bought in.
Yeah.
Just because your time and action is up doesn't mean that you're not part of this community going forward.
Okay. You want to kick us off?
All right. Hi there. I'm David Prince. I'm from the Executive MBA program, the 18s, who are about to graduate, hopefully. So we actually just came back from Copenhagen, one of our immersion trips, where we met with the Ministry of Digitization. Mm-hmm. And they seemed like they had a very top-down approach to what they're doing. Obviously, much smaller country, right? But they took an approach of how can we just reform the whole thing, single sign-on to all of these various, taxes, health, everything. It was a very impressive demo. And it seems like in what you've told us thus far, you're taking very sort of firefighting, bottom-up approach. Where can we tactically make the biggest difference on some? I'm wondering if there is an overarching vision for the future, or maybe a top-down approach that can happen, or is that just impossible in our current state?
Yeah, well, thanks for your question, and congratulations on your hopefully upcoming graduation. It's interesting. It's not the size difference between the two countries that I think is the issue. I think it's the federalism. Single sign-on is something that you mentioned. It is the key to digital governance. If you can get people to sign in regularly and you can specifically identify who they are electronically, then you can start to do away with really expensive, really terrible, laborious counter service. Counter service sucks, by the way, for you here in this area because you have to get up and go someplace. But if you're somebody in Montana and you need counter service from Social Security, you got to take a day off of work. You have to drive 4 hours, do counter service, and then drive back, right? And not everybody can do that. So that is the goal. The problem is, in a country where there is no federal ID, there is no single way to identify somebody, right? Identity is derived from the states. They're derived from birth certificates, by the way, which don't even have photographs. And there are 5,600 birth certificate issuing organizations in the United States. And so how do you derive identity that way? So we have a project called login.gov that is trying, despite the odds, and succeeding. And so we've launched a single sign-on authentication service, and we are working on building digital identity. So we have a pilot out right now working with some federal agencies. Most people have encountered the federal government in one way or another, and therefore we believe that we can use that data to identify you. The beauty of it, that is it. Single sign-on makes the world a better place for government services online. And the way that our country is built, which is correct and right, is just not built to do that. And so we are working on it at the time. We can go into how interesting that is and how, right, what it's like to have a single sign-on service that has no interest in knowing who you are, even though it's all about knowing who you are. That way we can actually protect your privacy and security better than any commercial company, I would argue. But that's not your question.
Great, thanks. Next.
Hi, I'm Megan. I am also in the executive program, but I'm a 19. I was thinking of USDS as kind of like a SWAT team that goes out and works with a bunch of different agencies, and presumably you're coming in to do something that they have full ownership over, and you're coming in to do it better than it's currently being done. And I imagine that could be sometimes tense. And so I was wondering, how have you cultivated these relationships where they embrace the innovation that you're bringing and the collaboration?
That is an exceptional question. You have hit the nail on the head, and the answer is not always well. We had a period, and every once in a while we still do knock on somebody's door and say you're doing it wrong. That's not a great way to start a project. The best way we found, like the most effective way we found, is really when something is really, really broken, very, very publicly broken, and they say, could somebody please help me? Like at this point, my pride is not in the way, right? Because like the difference is you either help me and I'm not on the front page, or you don't help me and I remain on the front page. Like that remains the best way, because that way people get out of the way, they let you use your skills, they see the benefits, right? They're willing to change their mindset because they're desperate for a solution. And from there, you can actually build a long-term relationship based on that, right? So the idea is when we have those moments to build that relationship, it works. There are always going to be times when something is bad and we have to call somebody on the phone and be like, this is more important than you're making it out to be. And then it is hard. Then it usually means that's usually when we get to duct tape, right? Like that's when we're just trying to get it to work, and then maybe we back off for a little while and let them, right? Like we try our best to give the credit for the work that we do to the people that do it every day, right? Just because we did something for healthcare doesn't mean that CMS isn't filled with thousands of civil servants that joined the government specifically to administer healthcare. Right? We didn't fix the system, we fixed a technical problem. And so we try to give credit to those people that do that work, right? We're trying to enable people to do their jobs better. Like nobody joined the federal government to manually retype a paper form, or even worse, to like a PDF, right, on a computer that's already there to retype it into another computer. But that is how a lot of the federal government works. And then printed it back, right? Like it's really true. Like it is really true how much. I'm gonna tell a story because that's what I do, I guess. Like we offered this guy a job. His name was Hunter, and Hunter was working on election systems in Pakistan, in rural Pakistan at the time. And he was, I can't remember where he was. Like he was really like far away from a major city. And we called him. We're like, we'd love for you to join USDS. He's like, great. And we're like, can you fax us the following information? And he's like, okay, hold on a second. He turns to the person next to him, and he's like, right, who's like from this town that he's working with, like a local election official. He's like, hey, do you guys have a fax machine? And the guy's like, a fax machine?
What's that?
It's 2018, no, 2016, right? Who has a fax machine? And it's like the entire federal government functions off of fax machines. Right? Like there's over-the-top fax companies that do nothing but replace fax with email to fax machines. Like, it's amazing. So if we can get rid of those things, if we can get rid of the manual retyping, which matters, right? Who knows how to spell your name, or in the case of immigration, transliterate your name better than you, right? There are so many misspellings that divide you into two people in the system that make you not whole when you go to apply for a service. Like, those things matter. When I was in the State Department,
when I was at USAID, the HR department had 23 different systems, and it deploys foreign service officers around the world. And every time they moved, and they don't talk to one another, and every time they moved, they would default to say that they were a DC resident, city of DC, and start taking out local taxes.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, now for how many years? I think it's 50 years that USAID's been around, and it's been deploying people around the world. And this, so that was one of the projects we took on, but it was exactly what you're talking about. It's just, and it actually is so rewarding to be able to say, we want federal government employees to be doing the value-added jobs, not actually looking at a PDF and putting it in and then printing it out and doing a fax. We got another question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, my name is Amy Lammers. Can you hear me? I'm a little
Yep,
short.
I gotcha.
I'm also in the Executive MBA 2018 program. I'm a disabled veteran, and so I've had the pleasure of using what I'm pretty sure is your My Healthy Vet program, correct?
Yeah, we're not, My Healthy Vet is not us.
You're not? Okay.
We
My
work
research
adjacent to
is,
My Healthy Vet. Shane would know
erroneous.
the answer to that better than I would.
Yeah, we work with them, but we are not.
Okay.
So for the mic, like we do work with them, but we are not My Healthy Vet. My Healthy Vet is one of the multiple identities that a veteran can have in the system.
I see. Okay, I'm sure I've used some of your programs though, because I'm also a JAG and I've helped a lot of clients using digital services with the VA. And I've found that while the VA itself and the military is extremely difficult to navigate, oftentimes these digital solutions make it much, much easier. And I wonder, easier than I've seen in commercial and civilian solutions. So my question is, to what extent are you able to cross-pollinate some of your solutions into commercial / civilian enterprises?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's difficult because oftentimes the government is solving what they think is a proprietary problem. We default to open source whenever we possibly can. We do work a lot with civilian contractors. But like when it's about getting what we've built, like what works into the hands of other people, I think it's more that we're leading by example. I think that most most of the people that are building these things, am I answering your question or am I off track?
No, I think you are. I was surprised to hear that the government considers it proprietary. So.
Well, there's a lot of that, right? The government is building things that they think are just for them, and we're trying to change that mindset. Right? So with things like login.gov, we built this system in the open, right? So that people could comment and submit. Like we actually have a project that rebuilds forms. It's like tries to convert forms, like paper forms into web forms so that we can do data collection properly. And that is an open source community. And so what we're really trying to do is we're trying to show the government that this is how this should be done, that it should be version 2 of that form. And in doing so, the government will turn around and actually ask people to build them the right thing. Like most of the private sector is just responding, if they're interacting with the government, to what the government wants. And if it's private sector doing bad private sector stuff, like that's up to you guys to handle.
Well, it's interesting because Blue Button was all your VA health records in one place, and it was done on open source. And to your point, Amy, they published it, and now Aetna and all sorts of just millions and millions of people. In fact, a friend of mine, who those of you who are going to Washington, D.C. will meet, Peter Levin, who was the CTO to the Blue Button, he went into his local doctor and they said, well, we want you to actually consolidate all of your healthcare records through this Blue Button thing we've just started. He says, yeah, I've heard of that. So he was the one that invented it. But let's go around here.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. The USCIS systems.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yes. I'm Cam. I'm also from the EMBA 18 program. The USCIS systems that you built for applying for naturalization sounds fantastic. I wish it was up and live, and I tried applying 2 years ago. So my question is, as you move more systems digitally and have them talk to each other, are there any data tenets that you are putting in place as USDA saying that this is how we are going to use our citizens' data and information to prevent excessive use of data for the sake of convenience?
Say that last part again.
So to prevent the excessive use of data
Yes.
for the sake of convenience.
I think I understand your question correctly. So you're asking, as we build these systems, are we taking into account what other uses could be made of this and making sure that the rules are set so like the program is set so that it can be used for the purpose it's intended and not something else?
Yes.
Yes. So this is a really, really difficult question, right? For any technologist in any field, is that like multiple use technologies are a thing. We do everything we can to bake into our products the purpose for which they are built. And so we are looking at everything from DevOps to security and privacy from a policy perspective and working through the process. So we do everything that we can. Every time we build something, though, like there's always the possibility that it will either be used beyond what it's supposed to be used or outlasted. But we do things like with login.gov, making sure that we can't access our own users' data. So under login.gov right now, if you go, you can sign up an account. You can access a few major systems right now. But the interesting thing as you do that is that you'll go through and there'll be a point in which we kind of break the user process by doing this really terribly sort of paternalistic thing, which is like, hey, we just gave you a recovery code and now we're gonna make you enter it again, right? To prove to us that you either copied and pasted or wrote it down. But the reason we do that is because without that recovery code, if you lose your phone or your two-factor device, we can't access your account. And so for us, we're taking some of these extra steps.
People.
We're trying to train people. We're also trying to build the system in a way in which like it does exactly what it's supposed to do, right? Which is supposed to get you access to what is yours
And
without
stay yours.
without somebody being able to take your identity from you.
Yeah, great. We'll get these last two questions, and then we'll say good evening, but we'll also give you an opportunity to talk to some alums or talk to Eddie one-on-one for a few minutes afterwards. Okay, so we'll take both these questions and then let Eddie answer both of them.
Hi, I'm Annie Powers. I'm in the full-time MBA program, class of 2020. I was surprised to hear about your kind of tour of duty model and people coming in for 3 to 6 months at a time. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about like managing teams in that environment and how you think about building institutional knowledge and continuity with all of that like, coming in and coming out.
Yeah.
Well, remember, he also told you sign up for 3 months, and then he convinced you to stay for 24. So, but before you answer that question, let me get one more in here, and then you can answer both of them.
Sure.
Sure. So my name is Kunjal. I'm also in the Executive MBA 18 batch. First of all, as a naturalized citizen of this proud country, thank you so much for the USCIS service that I have used. My question is really about, again, I don't have any prior political background, but looking at the problems which are very influential you solve, and thinking just from a technical perspective, 33,000 entries in 10 minutes, it's like in this current environment of where the information flows in like nanoseconds and picoseconds, like in a Valley, you can do that 10 years back. So there is this big gap on how things are executed back there in the White House versus what's been available here in the Valley. How can we help you fill that gap? It feels like you're living like 5 years behind, 10 years behind. So.
Yeah. 5 years is generous, I think. No, I think that's.
But you've gone from 100 to 5. That's a good progress.
Yeah, that's right. Like I used to joke that my dad went out of business as a Wang computer salesman in 1986, maybe 86, 88. And when I joined the State Department in 2006, lo and behold, there were Wang computers. Right? Wow. And so that gap, and then the iPhone came out in 2006 or 4, whatever. And I remember leading a big fight in my office in the State Department to get an iPhone in 2010, and we got them in 2011. So I'm like, hey, we've gone from, right, 28 years behind to only 6 years behind. So like, if you just sort of apply that, we should be catching up. But the answer to your question is you can join.
Yeah, right? That's why he needs you.
The answer to your question is like every single person can have an exceptional impact. Like this is my promise, and I will do everything I can to make sure that we put you in a place, or any of you in a place, where you will actually make a difference, and your name not going to be on a billboard, but you're going to be able to point to something 20 years from now and say, these people are here, right? Sabrina worked on a project to bring refugees into this country. When we raised the limit on refugees, we made the promise higher than what we could deliver. And she was given an impossible task of trying to increase that number by an amount that just did not seem rational or possible. And she did it because they set their mind to it, and a team worked their ass off, and they were able to deliver. And now those people are going to go on, live lives here. They're going to bring their families here. They're going to add to the community. They're going to add to the economy. It's all positive things, right?
Because
and like that is going to live on forever because of the work of that team. Like that is just a thing. Like.
Okay, so how do you manage these teams that come in for short periods of time in terms of knowledge, in terms of teamwork?
So there's two pieces. There's a management piece, which I think is easier for me to explain, which is we are a value-driven organization. We have 6 core values that we give people, and they are things like hire and empower great people, because not only are we hiring people, but we need our own team members to help us find more people, because every month we lose 5% of our staff, which means every month we have to hire 5% of our staff. And so we find the truth and tell the truth, work with users, not for them, right? Build with users, not for them. Go where the work is, create momentum, things like this. Like we have these values, we give people these values, we only bring in people that embody these values, and then we basically assign them a hard project and we let them be, like we don't manage them. We're an incredibly flat organization. There are times when we've built up some hierarchy for a specific purpose, but really
But you fundamentally respect them deeply and let them go
absolutely.
do their best work they've ever done in their life.
So we manage through hiring, right? So Seema here is on our talent team. Like, she's a more important manager in our organization than I am, because when she finds the right person and they work with the other right person, then my job is done, right? My job is to do different things. I'm just overhead. When it comes to knowledge management, right, and transfer, like that's a super interesting question, because we do not have access to great tools, right? The government has a lot of restrictions on what you can use, especially in the executive office of the president. And so we work really, really hard to have a culture of writing things down. So when we do work, we normally do it, especially new work, or we tackle new problems, we do sprint reports. And so we write a report that we not only give to our agency partners, but that we keep for our own knowledge. We record all of our projects. We've done more than 100 projects in more than 15 agencies in about 4 years. That's for the government, that's unheard of. But in a lot of cases, there's a lot of what I'm doing today, which is storytelling, right? There's a lot of lore. There are a lot of stories. They get better over time. We all look better over time, right? but there's value to that. Like there's a good. I'm a fan of a good oral tradition, and so I think that like we pass on these stories, it brings us closer. We have to talk to one another. It drives us together. We still have a weekly staff meeting where we tell stories, and that way we pass on this knowledge. And not only do we pass it on to the new generation, but we stay close with our alumni, and so we oftentimes reach out and be like, how did you solve this again? But it's inevitable in an organization that has as much turnover and moves as quickly as we do that we will lose some knowledge. And in a sense, maybe that's good, right? Because we're not the USDS we were 4 years ago. We shouldn't be. Our job is to focus on what's next.
That constant improvement, that constant, great. Well, Eddie, there was so much you said tonight that, well, all I can say is, on behalf of the people in this room at Haas, Berkeley, and the country, we're just so internally grateful from the bottom of our heart. And so really appreciate you coming here. And I would just say to this audience, if you decide to do this or recommend that a friend do this, I can absolutely guarantee you, as Eddie, that at your end days, you will say, this is one of the most impactful things I've ever had the opportunity to do in my life. So I'd really encourage you to take Eddie up on this offer or evangelize it to your friends. There is another agency, 18F, that you can be actually a green card holder.
That's right.
And join that does similar work. So if that's a gating factor for you, talk to Eddie about that. But please join me in saying thank you very much to Eddie. And to the other people at UCBF that are here. So he'll stick around for just a few more minutes if you want to come, and the people up in this front row are either currently at UC Digital, US Digital Service, or the White House, or an alum. So please talk to them if you'd like.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. You were fantastic. And what? Yes, it's more than okay. So, and I think that that example was fantastic. So, Eric.